Siegel with my co-conspirator, Dr. Paul Zeitz, who I've worked with for almost 20 years on social justice issues inside and outside of Congress. Now, we're the COVID-19 emergency response group. Our belief is that in the time of COVID, we need one united front, one big tent progressive movement. We don't believe that a siloed movements will fail, whether it's voting or healthcare. We have to work together. If we don't do that, the right wing will keep winning because they work together. The purpose of this group is really to do three things.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Harvey, why don't you go ahead and tell us the purpose of this group, since I don't have to do it. But thank you for being on the call, everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry. I'm on the phone. The obligatory computer thing happened. So here's the situation. We're all horrified, of course, about what's going on here. I want to say that there's an entirely new phenomenon going on that we haven't seen before. When these mass demonstrations have happened, there has been looting and other problems. But in case what we're seeing now across the country is that there are organized criminals who are actually doing break-ins. I mean, I've gotten reports from people at these demonstrations, and completely unrelated groups are going in and breaking into stores, and they're coordinated. They have communication systems. They have vehicles without license plates. I got a very extensive report from my friend Mila in Santa Monica, who was at a very beautiful demonstration, and it was just completely adjuncted by a group of criminals who were driving cars without license plates, on cell phones to each other, breaking into stores. And at the same time, we're also getting neo-Nazi groups who are jumping in on the chaos. These are Trump people, and they're painting swastikas and doing that sort of thing as well. I mean, it's really a nightmare. It's a whole new realm of disruption, and it's something that we're really going to have to pay attention to. I'm going round and around here with the circle on the video, but I can certainly talk on the phone. I hope you can all hear me loud and clear. Are we good?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Harvey.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking at my computer with a wheel going around. I'm not sure what's going on, but we can conduct a meeting. So we have a very clear agenda. We have a half hour. An hour and a half. It's going to be very full. I was talking to Joel today, and I want to reiterate basically the purpose of these calls, where we're headed, is very clear. We have an election coming up, the most important election probably in human history. I don't think that Trump can call it off. What they're going to do instead is subvert it as best they possibly can. And that means basically we have to understand every portion of this upcoming election. And there are three basic parts. Number one is making sure people get the ballots. And we had Andrea Miller last week, who did a tremendous presentation on the voter registration rolls. We know from Greg Palast and others that the registration rolls are being stripped all over the country to the tune of at least 17 million people. And getting people re-registered, getting them registered in the first place and then re-registered is, of course, a bigger challenge in the age of COVID, but it's something we have to do. And Andrea Miller and other people are working on it beautifully. It's very powerful and very important that we support that rule. Secondly, vote by mail. There are people who don't like vote by mail, but it is, in fact, the way elections are going to happen this year, and it does give us an opportunity to get paper ballots, and which is something that we've been desperately fighting for a long period of time, certainly since 2000. And but as we've been over on these calls, getting paper ballots to everyone is a major undertaking. I've put out a piece. God, now I'm getting an echo. So you can all hear me. Are you getting this echo?
Yes, unfortunately, we are hearing an echo.
I can still hear you pretty good.
I think my voice is echoing too. It sounds like everyone's echoing.
It's not as bad as sometimes.
Okay, how about now?
I didn't hear an echo. That was better.
Okay, is there no echo now?
No echo.
Okay, fine. So I'm still on the phone. I guess that's how it's going to have to be on this call. So we have three parts. The first part is the registration rolls, making sure everybody gets registered. The 17 million people that have been stripped from the registration rolls, we have got to track them down. This is a huge job. We have to register people for the first time. It's maybe the virus will lift to the point that we can start to do this in person. But obviously, in the critical swing states, it becomes absolutely vital to get people back on the voter rolls and get registered the first time. The third piece of the puzzle, which is we're going to talk about in great detail today, is the counting of the ballots. Now, we're assuming that people have gotten ballots. We've worked on that. We're assuming that people are registered. Once the ballots get to people, they have to come back in. We don't know if there's going to be a postal service and how we'll handle that. But we also are looking at a situation. We've had 5 states in this country that have been doing vote by mail for a long time. California is now going to do it entirely vote by mail. I think other states will probably go entirely vote by mail. The reality is that with absentee ballots, all states have had some vote by mail pretty much, for the duration. The transition to going entirely vote by mail means that all these election boards in all these states will be newly swamped with paper ballots. The question then becomes, how do they get counted? And John Brakey and Ray Lutz are going to give us a half hour. It's going to be in detail. It's going to be very technical, but it's something that we're going to have to face and face, full on. So that's going to come later in the meeting. It'll take up the bulk of the meeting. At the beginning now, we do have a report from North Carolina on a new piece of legislation from Common Cause. Are you on with us, Common Cause in North Carolina? Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Hey, Harvey, yes, we can hear you. Who is the speaker? Is it Bob Phillips or is it someone else?
Yes, it's Bob Phillips. Bob Phillips, are you on?
I do not see his.
How about Jennifer Roberts? Is Jennifer on with us?
Yeah, Jennifer Roberts. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, Jennifer, I can. And
I'm here. Yep. I sent the link to Bob Phillips again. He's supposed to be joining us, so I'm not sure what's up. I had to call in as well because my computer's not hooking up very well.
Somebody's probably messing with our Zoom. I'm not.
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Jennifer, and we can hear you fine, Harvey. So if you guys can proceed.
Okay, so Jennifer, if you'll give us a rundown on the, I'll go through this and then I'll come back to you. If you
Let me just say one thing. If you didn't update your Zoom when it told you to update it, the deadline was March 30th, and so May 30th. So you have to go in and update your Zoom account. We had trouble on our call on Saturday because of that. Okay, so that might be a problem.
Okay. I don't know if I'll be able to do it on this call, but we'll stick with it. Jennifer, in a minute or two. Now I'm getting an echo. Here we go. It says to update to the latest version. Anyway, okay, so I'll get away so there's no echo. Jennifer, and you'll be followed by Steve Rosenfeld. Steve, are you on the call?
Yeah, I'm on the call.
Okay, and also we're going to get a quick update from John Simon. on his book, and then once we're done with those three items, we'll go to John Brakey and Ray Lutz. John and Ray, you're on with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
John Brakey and Ray Lutz? Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Okay, I participated. Well, oh, and also Joel Siegel, you have expanded our network in North Carolina, and it's very significant and very important what you've done, and you brought some new people in. So I'd like to talk about that before we go to Ray and John Brakey. Is that all right?
That works for me.
Okay. All right. So Jennifer Roberts, if you will, can you please tell us what's going on with the legislation in North Carolina? Maybe Bob Phillips will join us, but I know you're on top of things in North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, hopefully Bob can join us because he gave a great update on a statewide call that we had last week. It's great to know that there are a number of folks around the state who are watching this closely and ready to support it. So this is a bill passed the House, but the Senate right now is a harder sell in North Carolina. And so this new bill that is sponsored by the Senate has got bipartisan support, which is great. And it would do a number of things. It would expand absentee voting access by allowing, right now, you have to either go in person or you have to send a request by mail after printing it and signing it and then putting it in an envelope and putting it on a stamp. This bill would allow people to email, phone, fax, or use a secure online portal to request an absentee ballot, which is a huge step forward. Also, in a time of COVID, the idea of having to get a stamp and go to a post office is kind of ridiculous. Second, it would allow, it would protect in-person voting by giving counties flexibility to recruit additional poll workers. It would provide sanitary supplies and protective gear because what Bob Phillips told us is that I think 90% of the poll workers are over age 65 in North Carolina, and so there's a big concern of having a shortage. So this bill would provide some funding as well as flexibility and rules. It also proposes Election Day as a paid state holiday and seeks to provide $500,000 of state funds to the Board of Elections for voter education. So the one more thing that is a possibility right now, North Carolina requires 2 witness signatures to send in an absentee ballot, which is a vote by mail ballot. This would reduce it to 1 signature, which is still ridiculous in time of COVID, but that's about the best they could get the compromise on. So, and a spouse can sign your ballot. So those are the main things in the bill. Bob may have more detail, but those are probably the most heartening provisions. And his sense is that it does have a good chance of passing. They've been working hard to get bipartisan support, and I think a lot of Republicans are recognizing that they have elderly folks who have a hard time with all the documentation. If you know anybody over 85 or over 90, you understand that a lot of things are just not easy, plus people in low-income communities. So that's a quick update, and hopefully if you have any questions, hopefully Bob will join us because he's got more of the inside scoop. But we're heartened in North Carolina. Yep.
Wow. Thank you, Jennifer. I believe I've actually installed Zoom and gotten on the meeting. Can you all see me? Hello?
I can see that beautiful Jewish boy face.
Well, you must be on the wrong call. All right, great. Well, we have 54 people. That was a really harrowing experience, I got to say. But if anybody else is having trouble and can only come in by phone, you do have to update your Zoom, which I just somehow did. I'm amazed. Okay, Jennifer, what are the prospects for this bill? You said it looks like it'll pass the House, but not the Senate. Is that right?
So, what we understand from Bob Phillips is that it does have a good chance, even the Senate bill has a good chance of passing. So right now they're, getting their network across the state to call their representatives. I'm sure that, Mecklenburg is a very Democratic county, so, we're pretty sure that our folks are on board, but it's going to take calls to rural counties as well. And of course, rural voters are as equally concerned because they're probably even further away from polling places and from places that they can mail, absentee requests. It was interesting on his call, Bob Phillips also, and I can't remember how many people were on the call, over 100. He said, please do this poll. How many of you are going to request or going to vote by mail? And typically in North Carolina, that's, under 10%, but of people on the call, almost 80% said they plan to vote by mail. So it's just a very interesting statistic that more people in North Carolina are paying attention and are concerned about having to show up in person after seeing what happened in Wisconsin. And I think there are a lot more plans to vote by mail. So that's a good thing. One thing they could not get the bill to agree to have a postage paid return envelope in with the mailed absentee ballot. So that's still a problem.
Harvey, I think screen just froze up.
Yeah, Harvey's been frozen into time like the Star Wars.
Yeah. Got a good smile on at least.
Remember the first Star Wars?
Yes.
That's a good position he's gotten frozen in. It's a good expression.
Yeah.
Does anybody know the answer to that? Are you not able to hear me?
Yeah, you were in this you were in a pose just for a second like this, like.
You were frozen for.
Yeah, you were frozen and for about a nano minute, but you're back now.
All right, can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the question was, have the courts not ruled that not putting postage on the return mail is not a?
Oh, Harvey, you're coming in and out. So we have, just to fill in while Harvey's frozen, we've got a couple of lawsuits pending in North Carolina. Voter ID is one of those. This bill actually includes.
He said something about a poll tax.
Yeah, sorry, I could not hear Harvey. Yeah, I know. You would think that requiring a stamp is a poll tax, but since people still have the option to vote in person, apparently it's not. The other thing I forgot to mention is that there probably will be voter ID. That was the prediction of Common Cause, but they have expanded the number of documents that will be accepted. So that's another part of the voter education. I mean, it is all very confusing. And so luckily we've got a number of statewide groups, including Democracy NC, that are working to get information to voters. But it's going to be all hands on deck. So that's my update. And I don't think Bob Phillips has joined us still. So you'll have to take my partial explanation.
Jennifer, I'm sorry. This is Bob. I just got in. I apologize.
Terrific. All right, Bob. Well, I just gave him a quick overview. Why don't you take it from here? Go.
Okay. Again, apologies, everyone. My name is Bob Phillips, and I work with Common Cause North Carolina in Raleigh, and apologize for the messy look. I have never gotten a haircut in all this. But what is happening in Raleigh is that a bipartisan bill was passed last week by the State House, which principally does a couple of important things, and maybe Jennifer might have already described it, but making vote by mail easier in North Carolina and then providing some flexibility for counties to address what we're fearing is going to be a poll worker crisis shortage. Specifically in North Carolina, and you all may know this, but voting by mail is not something that a lot of us do. In 2016, out of 4.7 million ballots cast, only 4% or 20,000 people actually cast a ballot absentee, as we call it here in North Carolina, an absentee ballot. And Karen Brinson Bell, who is the State Board of Elections Executive Director, is estimating that we might see a 40% participation in absentee ballot voting. That would be 2 million voters. So there's a lot that counties, I don't know if everybody on this call is from Mecklenburg County, but a lot of things that counties will have to do just to adjust for that giant surge in casting an absentee ballot. Right now, the way it works in North Carolina, when you have an absentee ballot, to get it, the only way to get it is to literally go to the State Board of Elections site or your County Board of Elections site and download a form, fill it out, put it in an envelope, mail it, and that's the only way you can do that. Whereas most states around us will provide ways to either fax or do it from your phone online or my goodness, I know you all, again, if you're from Charlotte, I will even tell you South Carolina, you can even phone it in, which is, they're ahead of us in that. So one of the things that this bill will do will provide other options where you can do it on your phone, i.e. by a online method, including what will be an online portal that the State Board of Elections will operate. Once you get your ballot, again in North Carolina, the law is that you have to have 2 registered voters in North Carolina witness you filling out the ballot. That is not that they see how you vote, but they have to witness you filling out the ballot, and they must sign that ballot under a penalty of perjury, meaning that if they are, filling that out falsely, they're subjecting themselves to a criminal charge. So 70% of the households in our state have 2 or less adults. In this day and age, it's not very convenient to think about having to find people who you will bring into wherever to watch you vote. I've got a 94-year-old mother who is still, thank goodness, active and alert and likes to vote. And I don't want her going to in-person voting, and yet she would have to find 2 people to watch her vote. And that's just, it's very, very inconvenient. So this bill will reduce that witness requirement from 2 to 1. And I should say that North Carolina is one of only 3 states in America that has a 2 witness requirement. And let me also tell you that this has absolutely nothing to do with the ballot harvesting issue that plagued the 9th Congressional District near you all, or part of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, obviously. This 2 witness requirement was already the law. It actually was passed in 2013. So reducing this from 2 to 1 has no bearing in terms of weakening or providing more opportunities to commit absentee ballot fraud. Real quickly, just a couple of other things. It provides more flexibility to counties, as I mentioned, with regards to the poll worker shortage. The average age of a poll worker is 70 years of age. We know when we go and vote in person, it is more of an elderly population that's doing it. We saw in Wisconsin a train wreck where so many poll workers did not show up. Already in Western North Carolina, as some of you may know, the Mark Meadows 11th congressional seat is open, and there's a Republican primary happening there June 23rd, and already 6 of the 8 or 9 Western North Carolina counties are asking the State Board of Elections for permission to reduce the number of precincts they will have on election day because many of their poll workers are saying, we're not coming to work, we're not going to show up. So this bill will provide a few things, including ways to recruit younger and more diverse poll workers by paying them more, by providing just more recruiting costs. and also giving the counties a little bit more flexibility of where they assign trained poll workers. Right now, the law is pretty much that you work the precinct where you vote, and obviously that creates gaps and sometimes problems for county board of elections. This law will allow the assigning of poll workers in any precinct in the county where they live. Funding, another big piece of it, and this will be the last thing I'll say, you may know that the CARES Act provided states elections money. North Carolina's share is about 12 million. There was also money in the Help America Vote Act, the HAVA, which was passed by Congress in December. Our legislature came back to work in late April. So this is their first opportunity to do what is necessary to grab the HAVA and CARES Act money, and that is provide a state match, a 20%, about $4.6 million of state money to grab 25 million of federal money. So this is, again, another big thing that this bipartisan bill, House Bill 1169, is doing. It is providing that state money. That's money that will be used to provide counties the funds they need for sanitizing the precincts, providing masks to voters, most importantly, providing the PPE to their poll workers. And it is also providing money to counties to be able to rent larger precinct spaces, maybe gymnasiums, school cafeterias, where in-person voting isn't so bunched up like it is in some of the places, perhaps, again, in Charlotte-Meck, like it is in Raleigh, where I'm at. Apologies for getting into the weeds of it, but I guess hopefully that is what you all wanted to hear. It is a bill that the Senate is running this week, we think, and
Yes.
I think it has a good shot of passing into law. So I'll stop there.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear?
Yes. We can
Okay.
hear you. Yes.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Bob? I mean, that's a really essential information in one of the major swing states. And
All right, very good.
good luck with that bill.
Yeah, I have a question. Tell us the dynamics of your state. Is both a Republican, is your legislature, both House and Senate, controlled by Republicans?
It is, and
okay. So here's what I'm getting at is what you are of the view that this Republican legislature will go along with these obvious common sense practices that are being very aggressively resisted across the United States and by President Trump. So my question for you is, what are you doing in terms of messaging or lobbying that is convincing Republicans in your state, that not like Wyoming or Utah, where they may have a long history of it, to say this makes sense? That's one. And the second is, how come you're still sticking with the one witness thing, which is going to be practically a no-show? So is the one witness as the default centrist position, in essence, a fig leaf that will still keep millions from voting in your state? So those are two different questions, but how are you getting Republicans to go along with expanding?
Okay, you got it. He's got it. He's got it. Go ahead.
Art, a very good question, and I will tell you, North Carolina has been the poster child for bad government. We probably lead the country, or have led it, in voter suppression and other things that this Republican-controlled legislature has done to our state in the last decade. And I say that as a nonpartisan advocate for good government with common cause. But to your question, Art, and I've been surprised, we haven't seen this kind of bipartisan work in a decade. And I think it's two things. And in terms of our lobbying, we are trying to appeal and say, look, your voters are going to need this as well. North Carolina is a state of about 5 million, 6 million, I guess, registered voters. Republicans and Democrats, we're a highly competitive state. it kind of evens out. There are more registered Democrats in the state, but in terms of how people vote, it's very competitive. So I think Republicans get that. That's one thing. The other would be that as we have done in North Carolina a lot, and it has helped us sort of fend off some of these terrible things that, again, the majority party has passed on us, is there is litigation. A lawsuit was filed by the good folks at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. Some of you may have heard of them. Allison Riggs is the executive director of it. And they do have a lawsuit that has been filed. And although in terms of where it is, it's in a federal court, I think part of the motivation for the Republican Party is let's do what we can now, and maybe we'll stave off what a court might tell us to do, which would be even worse. The one witness, Art, to your question, that's really the best deal we could get. Actually, a better deal would have been zero, no witnesses, like most states in America do, but we could not get anything beyond going from 2 to 1. So hopefully I've answered your question.
Yeah, that's really good, Bob, really good. And everybody should understand this is North Carolina we're talking about. This is one of the big 6 swing states. North Carolina could decide the election. And it's incredibly important what you're doing there. Joel Siegel, you wanted to jump in. Thank you, Art, for that question. The two of them. Joel, you wanted to jump in and talk about the coalition building in North Carolina, which is incredibly important. If you can do it quickly, that'd be great. And let's keep rolling here.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. First of all, great. Well, I did want to urge everybody to watch Mimi Kennedy's comedy In the Loop if you have Netflix. It's one of the best political satires ever. And she is the star of the show. Just want to let everyone know about Mimi Kennedy. She's on the screen here. Great actress. Yeah, what's happening in North Carolina is through the leadership of Colette Austin. By the way, this is the first time I've seen on a Zoom screen all the pictures. I guess I've been missing that for the last year. She's been organizing in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and across the state through the African American Caucus, a true coalition around getting people registered to vote. And what the statistics show is that if we ramp up the African American vote and the Hispanic vote, whether it's North Carolina or any other state, then the Democrats can win. If we don't do that, then there's a chance that Democrats will not win. The myth of the swing voter is a myth. That's been the Democratic Party that I've been working for the last 30 years, where they got it wrong. They try to get to the swing voter. That's not how you decide an election. Elections are decided by 1 or 2% by Hispanics and African Americans and students. So what we're doing in North Carolina is Jennifer Roberts, our former mayor, is organizing a state town hall meeting to go ahead and build our coalition. And Colette is spearheading the effort on registration and direct contact with voters, which I've never seen before. But Colette, can you introduce yourself? And I'm glad you're on this call. I do like your cap, and I like the picture of Prince in the background. But can you talk about what you're doing, please?
Sure. So it's a bit twofold. Here in North Carolina, what we've seen in some of the data that we've been collecting is that there's a lot of Black registered voters. We also have a lot of registered voters, period, here in Mecklenburg County. The issue is that these voters aren't going out to vote. So what we're targeting in on, especially, first and foremost with the African American community, because I do represent the African American caucus of the Mecklenburg County Democratic Party here as president. We are focusing on making sure that people are actually going to be going to the polls. One main part of that is education. And education is going to be used a bit fluidly as we talk about North Carolina, as you get on different calls. But the education of where we're coming from is actually teaching people about what they need to understand about politics, about the system. When we talk about systemic racism, we are within a system, especially as Black people, where we don't understand the system under which we're being oppressed. So we're providing actual voting education materials that come all the way from the party level of government all the way up to the White House, specific here to people in Mecklenburg County. So we'll be able to see, as we're teaching people, who's representing us on the county commission, what the county commission is supposed to do with us or for us, the city council, all our town councils. We have 8 different townships here in Mecklenburg County. Connecting all those dots to our state legislature, our state senators, our House of Representatives, connecting that precinct number and just starting from that level of who your representatives are. There are different districts for your city council versus your county commission versus your, House and state representation. So that piece is very confusing, I think, for most people. A lot of people don't understand their powers behind that. And that's what we're injecting into our community, to have people understand what their powers really are. So that's some of the things.
That's fantastic.
The caucus.
That's really fantastic. It's really, so you and Jennifer and Joel are going to do a statewide Zoom call. We will connect everybody on this call to that statewide Zoom, because I know Bob Patrick is going to do one in Ohio, and these need to be, templates for the kind of organization that you just talked about. And we'll have you back next week to talk more. North Carolina is absolutely critical in this election, as you know. We're working on the presumption of 6, 6, and 6 swing states. The top 6, of course, are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. And so you're right in the heart of it, and it sounds like you're doing exactly what needs to be done. Is there anyone else have a quick question before we move on?
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, Colette
Please.
and Bob and Jennifer.
Hi.
Okay. This is, I sound like a broken record, and maybe I'm the girl who cried wolf, but this regards something that might happen in North Carolina. I've just looked at your state and see that you get handed a paper ballot after you sign in most counties, which is great. And it does mean, however, that people who have applied for a paper ballot, that will be next to their name on the voter rolls. And if by any chance they didn't get that paper ballot in the mail because of, things that we could predict, they're going to have to vote provisional. I've looked in the North Carolina election code, and I have to infer this because no one makes it explicit that that is what happens. But if you can't prove that you haven't already voted in that election, you're ineligible to vote in that precinct, even if it's your precinct. And that means you're ineligible if it says you've been issued a mail ballot. That would mean it just hasn't gotten to you. In California, as a poll worker, always the new and the young voters had no idea about this rule. I call it the surrender rule. No one else will. You can't search surrender in any election code really, except California's, and find it. It's provisional or absentee, and I have to comb through. But I find that this clash will occur at the polls where there's no electronic sign-in, i.e. you're going to be signed in and given a paper ballot. The poll worker by law.
Okay.
Okay. What do any of you know about this, or what happens? We need to educate the voters. Check on your paper, your absentee ballot. Make sure it's there in time. If you don't get it, complain. And finally, if you want to go vote in person and you have gotten that mail ballot, you must take it in to surrender as proof you didn't use it. Have any of you ever heard of this before?
Actually, Colette, Mimi, we've been asking that question, and it is a felony to provide a absentee ballot to someone other than a family member or a guardian.
No. That's not what I mean. I do not mean that.
Well, yeah, let me just finish, please. Okay. What I was going to say, though, is my understanding, and I have gotten this from the Board of Elections director in Wake County, and we're actually larger than Mecklenburg as far as registered voters.
Yeah.
And I was not told that you had to physically bring the ballot in. People in North Carolina right now can request an absentee ballot. They'll get it September 4th when absentee ballot voting begins. You are not mandated to vote an absentee ballot. If I decide I get an absentee ballot in the mail and I choose to go in-person voting, I can do that. My understanding is I do not have to physically bring that ballot to the poll. Obviously, they'll know if I have voted.
Okay, you know what?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to do, and Mimi and I will, why don't we prepare something in writing? We do have a stacked agenda, and it's a good thing you brought this up, Mimi. I do have the document, the 20 points of vote by mail, and I will expand the surrender clause, which Mimi has really been great about. And let's make sure we have everything understood. But critically, as we're talking here, we do have the voter registration, we have how to do vote by mail, and then we have to make sure that the ballots are counted. And the surrender clause here is extremely important. And let's discuss it in greater detail next week. But is that all right with both of you? Mimi, is that okay?
Yeah, it's just I'd love to be on that call. I'm worried about it. The understanding doesn't seem to be supported in the law, but the law is very muddy, and I just want to know who's on this, because North Carolina, it might pertain to numbers of voters.
Well, let's have the conversation through the week, and let's get it cleared up in next week's call. And we can have something in writing. That's critical, because it's going to differ from state to state. North Carolina is critical, but the surrender situation is critical. And let's deal with it through the week, and we'll have something very clear for everybody next week. Is that all right?
I have a very quick
Hello?
question.
Hello? Yes, Harvey. Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a very quick question for Colette.
It's got to be quick.
Are you, for this big call you're doing next week, you're looping in the North Carolina NAACP and Reverend Spearman and all that, because they're very active on election integrity issues as well, in addition to vote by mail and voter repression and so on. So they're just— That's
a great suggestion.
They're smart people.
Send me the contacts. Yes, send me the contacts. I'll work with Joel and Colette and Jennifer, and we'll do that. Okay. All right, we got to move on because we do have a very substantial presentation on the vote counting. Steve Rosenfeld very quickly, and then John Simon very quickly. Steve, can you give us a report on the latest on deadlines? It's really a hot issue now, and we have to be aware of that as well.
Well, all I'm going to say is this, the agenda is too stacked to spend too much time on much of anything, is that when I spoke last week to Phil Kiesling, who was the former Secretary of State of Oregon, which was the state that initiated voting at home and voting by mail, he said the single biggest reform that would solve a lot of problems, from disinformation to disenfranchisement, was extending the deadlines on the application periods before the election days and in the certification days. He thinks it should be 30 days to December 1st or 2nd this fall. The only way that's going to happen is if governors, through executive order, or legislatures do it in special session. The problems that people may see in all these primaries and statewides coming up in the next 90 days is sort of the lever to force that. I'll just leave that there. And that's all, there's too much else for people to talk about for me to go on anymore.
Well, let's go into greater detail on this next week. You have a piece out. Can you post the link?
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
piece?
sure.
It's a really good.
It basically
good piece.
It basically goes into this and says in Pennsylvania that they're not going to have enough time to process and count after Election Day, and a lot of people are going to be confused tomorrow. But it's not, and Pennsylvania doesn't even have the shortest deadlines of the 9 states holding primaries, and Washington, 8 states in Washington tomorrow. Yeah, I'll post it.
Right, and we have to remember, folks, that the deadline issue was really at the core of the Bush v. Gore decision in 2000, and then it definitely swung the governorship and the Senate seat in Florida. So, on the list of 20 things about vote by mail, this deadline issue is huge, and Steve's doing great reporting on it. So we should all look at his article. John Simon, I give you 1 minute for your book. You've got Code Red out in a new edition. John Simon, are you with us?
Here I am. Thanks, Harvey. Yeah. You can all hear me? All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I spent 10 years helping Election Defense Alliance organize and do that work. And around 2016, I pulled back for that for a variety of reasons, one of which was that I wasn't very good at it. But
your book.
I've devoted myself to writing, for the last 10 years. And since 2016, Code Red book has gone through 3 editions. And the most recent one came out just earlier, in the beginning of May. And I just want to bring it to the attention of everybody. Some of you probably already know about it. But what it does is that it keeps putting on weight with every 2-year cycle. and now it's pretty hefty. But what it does is—
How do people get it?
I'm sorry?
How do people get it?
Okay, so I put the Code Red 2020 website down on the chat, and it's available there. I mean, you can go to Amazon from there. You can also just go search Simon Code Red or Code Red Simon on Amazon, and you can get it.
Okay.
Or you can just contact me. You know, I can send you a PDF, so you can do that through the website. Basically, you know,
Just put your
where I think it can be most useful is just building the kind of awareness that we need. If we're going to lobby, you know, and get people to pay attention. We just need more pressure out there. It's also got it has a bibliography and references and a glossary, and basically tells the whole story from pre-Hobbit days right up to COVID and the impact that that's going to have on the 2020.
All right, yeah. It's an excellent book, John. We want to thank you for it. If you'll post the link, post how to get to you, to get the book, that will be great. You've been an integral part of this movement, and it's extremely important. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thanks, Harvey. I'm going to put it up now.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, so we got 40 minutes. We have two of the leading experts. This is going to be deep in the weeds, but it's what we have to do, John Brakey and Ray Lutz. If you'll take 30 minutes, as we discussed, to present the third piece of the triangle here. We've got registration, we've got vote by mail, and then the question is, how do we count the ballots? And this is extremely important because these states which have not done vote by mail in the kind of volume that we're talking about, they've done absentee, but not vote by mail. They're going to be swamped with ballots. And the physical job of counting them is, of course, as Joe Stalin said, it doesn't matter who casts the ballots, it matters who counts them, and in this case, how they're counted. So John and Ray, everybody prepare yourselves for a deep dive here in the technicalities, which could decide everything, even with a flip of the switch, after we do all this work. So John and Ray, if you'll tell us, please, for the next half hour, what you've got on the ballot imaging and the counting of the ballots.
Hey, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, talk to everybody, and also to work with my friend Ray Lutz, that we've kind of traveled around a little bit together, been working together since the 2016 election, and I'm very excited about what Ray has developed, and that will match into what we're trying to do. What's my mission is how to make elections transparent, trackable, and publicly verified. And we believe that transparency is the solution, and that's what we work for. Audit is an acronym. It stands for Americans United for Democracy, Integrity, and Transparency in Elections. Since 2016, we have been in 18 states. I go into a state and we do what we do, track condition reports. Thank you, Mimi Kennedy, for coming up with that name. I've been faithfully doing those reports. And I find them to be very, very enlightening because, there's so much difference in every state. And presently, Florida, we're there. Arizona, we're watching very carefully. That's where I live, in fact. North Carolina, great state, a lot of difficulties. Reverend Spearman is a very good friend of mine and is an excellent person in elections. And I know we talked about him earlier. Tennessee, I'm in right now. What's going on there is pretty incredible. We're seeking funding to go in other states because, there are a lot of great activists out there that we know, because I work with everybody all across the country, or I try to at least. And we at Audit AZ have come to the experience that informed digital civilians and activists and attorneys are the best disinfectant to go ahead and help us cure our problems that we have, because we have a lot. I trained under many years under Bill Reisner, and I forgot to turn on my timer here because I'll make sure I don't go over 15, so I've already used a minute. So anyway, I worked with Bill Reisner out of Arizona since the very beginning. We did probably about a dozen lawsuits together all through Arizona. In 2016, I met this guy through Bernie Sanders. His name is Chris Sauter. Chris Sauter is one of the top attorneys in the United States when it comes to elections. He actually wrote the book on elections, and also he worked for Obama before he came into office and getting him into office, and then went off and kept doing his work in elections. He actually wrote the book on recounts in the United States that are used. And so he's very knowledgeable. You know, basically, why is a black box called a black box? Because we really don't know how it works. Information comes in, information comes out. You know, we don't have a system of really auditing in this country or anything like that right there. It makes it extremely difficult. The problem with the black box is the machine is vulnerable to hacking. All these things I think most of you know, but the biggest failure that I find is the logic and accuracy and auditing and what goes on in that whole process. You know, when I go into an election department, I don't go in there and try to be an activist and say, hey, I don't like your voting equipment. I think this is wrong. I go in there and I start off with talking to them about cynicism that we fight because, you know, in 2016, if not voting was a presidential candidate, they would have won by a landslide, okay? It's a severe problem that 44% of the people in this country who could have voted in 2016 don't vote. And a lot of those people, I believe, you know, have good reasons to be cynical about the system, because I know that I am, okay? You know, I think a lot of us can look back and say that, you know, if voting made a difference, they wouldn't let us do it, as Mark Twain would say. And we don't verify elections at all, okay? We have a situation in our country that we have 4 vendors that are really controlling 90-some% of the vote in this country right now. You know, for a long time, well, first off, I did a report last November because I wanted to see how much of the country has gone digital that creates ballot images. And, you know, I originally came up with, I had ES&S at 42%, but I did not realize that ES&S bought Diebold, and I knew they had bought Diebold because we kind of forced them into doing it. You know, we sued in 2007, won a big lawsuit, got all the databases and was able to expose a lot of things. And right after that is when they spun the company off to Premier, and then the Justice Department jumped in and they said, hey, you can't do that. You have a monopoly. So what did they do? They spun off the intellectual property of Diebold, and they went ahead and sold that to Dominion, but they kept all the accounts. Georgia, all these years we thought was Diebold, was really being run by ES&S. A lot of different states have that kind of situation. So when you look at the market and you say, well, they're only 42%, no, you have to add the 8% of Diebold into their part, and it gets them over 50%. And I would say this, is that I do have difficulties with ES&S and their business practices. I believe that they have terrible practices, and I think that a document that we just put out asking for a congressional investigation into the business practice of the vendors, which I'm willing to share, and I'll put it as a link at the end, or anybody who wants it can email me. My 2 lawyers who are handling it have put an excellent report, and we're trying to get this investigation going because of how they are out there lying, manipulating. You know, Philadelphia is a good example. They got fined $2.8 million for turning around, having their lobbyists paying monies to candidates or political figures. They got fined 2.9. And what's really incredible is that when they got caught, they said, you know, we'll pay the $2.9 million, but we want to keep the contract. And I get kind of surprised by that, because if I was going to work with somebody who was screwing me around, I don't know if I'd want to keep working with them. Well, anyway, that's a big problem, because with these ballot marking devices that I'm fighting in Tennessee right now, it's a community that is heavily Democratic. In fact, Shelby County is the largest county in the state. It is 65% Democratic, okay? And it is like these other communities that I find across the country, that I find communities of a color are under assault. And I'll have to say this, Mecklenburg is one of them. I spent time there, met with the election director. I couldn't believe anybody who could say to me, you know, if he had his way, he would mail somebody a DRE before he'd mail them a hand-marked paper ballot. And we know that hand-marked paper ballots is the gold standard. The guy that you're seeing on the screen right now, his name is Mickey Donahoe. He was a mentor who taught me a lot. He taught me that a logic and accuracy test only proves one thing. It's working right at this moment. Because when I go into those election departments and around the country, I walk in and say, hi, my name is John Brakey, and I'm here to help people vote. And you know, confidence in voting is very, very important. And I give them a pitch about, you know, that 44% didn't vote 2016. And then I ask them, well, how do you know that your results are good? And they will always come back for the most part, most of them do, and they say, oh, that's easy, Mr. Brakey. We run a logic and accuracy test. And you know, I have to turn to them and have to say, gee, is that like that Volkswagen diesel? Because what is a logic and accuracy test? A logic and accuracy test is when you take test ballots, you pre-fill them out, you run through the machine to see if it adds up all right. Well, Volkswagen invented a computer to put in their diesel car. They built like 11 million of these worldwide. They sold 580,000 of these in the United States, and it probably passed emissions 2 million times. An emission test is no different than a logic and accuracy. It's supposed to prove that everything is working right when it's really not. Volkswagen got fined $2.8 billion. They had to buy back all the cars. There's 370,000 diesel cars sitting in parking lots in this country that they're trying to figure what they're going to do with. I don't think it's ship them overseas or whatever. But it's certainly a big disaster because we do not audit elections. It is something that we need to be very concerned about. And for us, what we're very concerned about is programs like Fraction Magic. I was on the Fraction Magic team. In fact, we filmed this at Mimi Kennedy's house. That me, Bev, Mimi Kennedy, and Benny Smith, who's somebody that we should have on this program maybe the next week or two to explain how serious a problem this really is. But one thing that Benny will tell you is that Fraction Magic can change the vote totals on the fly, especially if you have VPN, the virtual private network. And sometimes we have to question, what does virtual really mean? You know what I call this system? I call it the insiders network. It's a very serious problem. My God, somebody can come in. I mean, hey, you move ballots with 2 people, you have custody, and then all of a sudden you go VPN. I mean, me and Steve Rosenfeld in Michigan, we were chasing VPN. We could never find the central computer for Detroit. You know, Michigan is another one of those states that have it. Wisconsin, there's a lot of states that are using VPN, and it violates the rule of chain of custody. It really does. Moving on here. You know, I only have so many minutes. I'm at 9.5 minutes right now, and I really can't tell you all, but this is a report that goes into detail of what we've learned in state after state and what we're doing and what we're trying to do. So I would encourage you to either write me or I can post this up and you can pull it down to get a real flavor, because every state is different.
John, can you post the link?
Pardon me?
Can you post the link to that report?
I will do that. Moving on here is that, let's get back to these vendors, okay? First off.
Well, which vendors are we worried about here at the tail end of counting the paper ballots?
Well, let me just keep going on here. It's ES&S is the big one. They're 50% of the market, and they are corporate hucksters, okay? They lie. They stand up in the Congress. 3 times they were asked if their system was ever connected to the internet, and the first 2 times they said no. And the 3rd time they said, oh, but it's only connected to the tabulator. Wow, that's the worst place you could be connected. But our Congress people, they got that answer. They were asking questions somebody told them to ask, and they really didn't know what it meant. It's really pathetic. Right now in this country, when it comes to digital, if we're not going to go heavily vote by mail, and the Republicans push to keep us away from vote by mail because they're afraid they win elections by less people voting. I mean, let's face it, that's the big fight that's going on here. 80% of all ballots cast and counted, hopefully counted, in the 2020 election will have ballot images. But if we go 100% or 95% vote by mail across this country, it will be 97% of every ballot counted will have this happen. With digital scan voting, there are 2 ballots, the one that you marked and the one that was taken as a picture. And these machines do not count the ballot, they count the picture that was made of that ballot is what they do. And by law, they have to preserve these things. That's what we do. We run around the country. We, investigate, educate, let them know that they can't destroy. Then we agitate a little bit, and then we go in and we pull a writ of mandamus to go after them. Okay.
All right, now, John, my understanding then is the key to counting the ballots in the 2020 election, assuming, as you say, that more than 90% of the voting is going to be done vote by mail with paper, the key to counting the ballots then is these machines. Who makes these machines, and how do we get control of making sure that they do an accurate vote count?
They all make this machine now, okay? Because the old system went extinct. The old system was Mark sense technology. That was a light coming down on a piece of paper, and if there was a dark spot, it got absorbed, left no evidence behind. The new system takes a picture. The picture is a public record. The picture offers redundancy. Why are they destroying these ballot images in a lot of places, especially in communities of color? Because they don't want to leave a record behind. Because getting at the originals are very hard. They're afraid if people got at them, they could have a piece of lead below their finger and make a stray mark. These are the excuses that they use. In some states, like my state, you can't get at them unless you're get a recount even, unless the results are within 0.1%, and there are states that are worse than Arizona, okay? It's a real problem. There is no auditing. There's just logic inaccuracies, and I had a zero tape and I had a tape at the end, and that's the problem. But let me continue, because Ray's going to go into part of this, and so I don't want to take up any of his time. I just want to show you some things.
Okay, we're at 3:06.
Yeah, well, I'm at 13 minutes right now, so give me my 2 more minutes, okay? I'm going to move.
You got it.
I'm done. What you're looking at right now on the screen is a ballot image, and in the ES&S system, 483I is for image, 483 is the number assigned, C is cast vote record, and then we got a list of vote records. If you get the list of vote records, you've just made the black box transparent. If you have the ballot image, if you have the cast vote record, if you have this file right here, you can go ahead and do your own math. Now, if this was active right now, if I was to click on 483I, it would open up the actual image. If I was to click on 483C, the actual cast vote record. And what you're looking at is a spreadsheet, and you can analyze the total election with it. Moving on here, and I'm going to keep going because I'm getting too close to the end, and I want to get through this. When I talk about, again, the writ of mandamus, what is it for? It's to order, I take them to court, and we basically say, Your Honor, could you please order these people to follow the law because they cannot destroy these things. The importance of ballot images is redundancy. I want to state right now, the most important document is that hand-marked paper ballot. The second most important document is the image. Then it's the cast vote record, then the ledger. You get all three, you've got the system to be able to have a way that we can audit. I call these things impunity busters. And that's what is important to having a system like that. In summary, we're pioneering an achievable system to make elections transparent, trackable, and publicly verified using a new voting technology. Very few people know about this. And with that, I just want to say, hey, this is an important organization. Ray Lutz is up next. He's going to give you a phenomenal explanation how this can be done using a system that he has built. I've worked with Ray for 4 years. He's a phenomenal guy. And Ray, go ahead.
All right, thanks.
Well, John, you've taken us, and Ray's going to take us deeper. You've taken us to the core of the situation here. We are going to have to know everything about how every county is going to count these ballots. If, as you say, these ballot imaging machines are going to be everywhere, then we got to know that they're working. Actually, Bob Petrakis found in Ohio that they were using these voting machines and weren't turning on the ballot imaging device. So, Ray, let's go ahead and let's continue here. You got 15 minutes.
Okay, so if the host can please let me share my screen, I'll give you get my presentation started. Let me see if I can get that up. And it's disabled, so whoever the host is, if you can please enable that. So basically, I'll just get started until that gets enabled. My name is Ray Lutz. I am an engineer. Some people have accused me of being an attorney recently, and that's not the case. Okay, so I can't, okay, here we go.
Ray,
So-
can you try now?
Yeah, so do you see my screen up
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So if you want to just try to focus in on that screen, I'll be going through this presentation. We started citizens oversight back in basically in 2006 when I was working fighting Blackwater. They tried to set up a paramilitary training camp in San Diego here, and that was a big success, but a year and a half of work. And during that time, they had a recall election that really got me interested in really looking into elections. And that's what also, it was the seed for this ballot image auditing system that we're doing now. Also fought the reopening of the San Onofre nuclear plant and was involved in providing oversight audit instruction for people how to do that. Also, by the way, arrested for registering voters, a little street cred here. Back in 2011 during the Occupy movement, I was registering voters there and they arrested me for that. And we won that one though. Now, basically, I want to cover election audits in general because I think they're so important. These robust election audits, if we can get them, can ensure that the outcomes are correct. But improper audits can cover up manipulation, and they frequently just do that, and they're just theater. If we don't watch them carefully, that's all they are. And it takes some really focused watching to watch these audits. We've got to have citizens do it because we can't trust the officials. The problem is they're doing their own audits. Okay, that's the key thing. Now, just want to review what we've done recently in California. We were organizing teams to do audit oversight. We discovered in San Diego they were leaving out 37% of the ballots from the audits. We sued them for that, won, and then they changed the law through AB 840 to say it's okay to leave out 37% of the ballots. That was the later arriving vote by mail ballots. So this is one of the issues, is that these audits a lot of times don't include vote by mail ballots in a lot of areas. I know in Cook County, I think Chicago area, Dr. Laura was telling me that they're not including vote by mail at all in those audits. Now, the key election hazard in these audits is that the officials are auditing themselves. They're not independent. So that means that the workers are commonly trying to, fix problems all throughout the election. That's what they're trained to do. And then when the audit comes, they continue to fix problems, but they're really not allowed to during the audit part. When they innocently fix up the audit to make it look clean, that's what we call innocent fix up. This was being done in Los Angeles, where they routinely rescan the ballots and then got the new computer report and only reported on the new totals. Now, also, audit should be simple, not more complex than doing the election itself. Otherwise, you're not gaining any ground. There's some slides here that I wanted to skip, but I couldn't get them to go right. Now, ballot image audits, as John was saying, is focused on these ballot images that are now being produced by most of the new, or pretty much all of the new equipment. And what we're calling a ballot image audit basically exhaustively recomputes the tabulation based on the images. And the key thing here is it's independent. It isn't done by those election officials, so there isn't an opportunity for them to fix it. Also, it can cover all contests, and as we're not have to struggle to get, as I guess I skipped the slide, I'll go back to it. Risk limiting audits, as you'll hear about, are good in terms of getting a sample and checking it, but they really have a hard time if you have lots of small contests. These don't have that problem. We can check all the voter intent issues. That is, how did the person actually mark it and what did they intend? That's most of the issues that you'll find is just misinterpretation of that. And then any election processing errors we can catch with this type of audit. And nearly all malicious attacks, something like fraction magic, this will catch. It doesn't catch everything. There is a chance that the ballot images could be changed. But this is so new that we don't expect people to be doing that at this point. It's a higher confidence because we're checking more of the ballots, As I said, it doesn't have those innocent fix-up errors, and it's compatible with the various scanners. And let me just go back real quick. The problem with the risk limiting audits is that the sample sizes explode at tight margins. And you can see here this ballot comparison audit, which is the best one that they have in risk limiting audits, is it goes up when the margin gets down below 2%. And the other type, when it's down, you know, basically around 5 or 10 to 5%, it starts to go through the roof. We're talking 5, 10, 15, 20,000 ballots you have to look at randomly to be able to run these. So in my view, risk limiting audits are a failure, and they're not going to be something that will be adopted in any kind of wide scale thing, but they can be used sometimes pretty well. Let me go back to the main line here. So here's some pictures here of some scanners that we're being used today or in this last election. The one up in the top left-hand corner is a very large, what they call a COT scanner, which means it means commercial off the shelf, meaning you can just go out and buy one of these. They are not designed specifically for elections. Same with this one in the top right-hand corner, which is a straight through type of scanner, massive thing. What is that? About 15 feet long. This is the thing that was used in Los Angeles to do their scanning. And then the ES&S central count DS850 I've showed down there in the bottom left-hand corner, and that you can see has a sort of S-shaped paper path, very distinctive because of that. The same company, their DS200 is the precinct scanner. Now those do make ballot images that are suitable for us to do our full audit on. They're not as good as we'd like, but they're good enough. And so we can make really good progress with that. Now let me skip down because I wasn't planning on showing these. So since about last year, about August, basically I decided that I'd had enough. We kept collecting these ballot images, and so we went ahead and started working on this thing called auditengine.org. And what you do for, I'm not going to get too far in the weeds as Harvey keeps saying, you know, this is going to be a horrible presentation because it's so far in the weeds. We'll save that for tomorrow. You know, you can come in and come into the more in the weeds presentation. I'm going to have one tomorrow at noon Pacific. But for right now, I just want to say that we take the image archives, we get to have those uploaded, and then we get the cast vote record if possible. There's this thing called an election information file, which basically describes what we're looking for on the actual ballot. We have to know what's printed on the ballot, not what's in a database for what that says, but what it actually says. And then there's a process where we create templates so that we're ready to extract the vote. And there's some human assisting there. And then finally, we extract the vote through a process where we can use many computers in parallel in the cloud. Now, while you're looking at my screen, I'm going to move this thing running here. And if you just can look at this console, it'll restart in a second. It's trying to open it up a different file. But this is going to be showing you the rate if you're running this on a single computer, how fast it goes through each one of the ballots. So you can see this is taking through like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is actually scanning and extracting the vote out of ballot images from the San Francisco primary election, which has 500,000 ballots, 500,000 ballots. The way we can do this without taking several days is that we use the cloud-based services, which lets us run 1,000 computers in parallel. So we've got this sort of heavy horsepower available, and we're going to be able to use it for our side of the competition here. And so that's what I think. I wanted you to let you know how this is moving forward. Let me just move down to the next slide. Basically, I want to give you this. This is the only like mathematics thing I'm going to show you. But basically, there are some ballots that are left out of the audit. Okay, so that we're going to call M. So basically, our process isn't perfect because some of these images are just really crappy. but it isn't a big number. Then there's a certain
Well,
number.
what happens? What happens to ballots that have crappy images?
Well, let me finish. Then there's a total ballots in disagreement that where we disagree with each other, but we haven't looked into those yet. And then there's the margin of victory. Now, if the margin of victory in votes is greater than what we disagree on, or that we decided we couldn't process easily, then we say it's fine. Now, if it isn't, then we have to do some more work. So we have to go in and refine the audit and say, well, every one of those ballots that we said we couldn't process, those are set aside, put in a folder with the image, and then we can look at why it is that we're not doing those. As time goes on, we're going to be doing better with how many that we're missing. It isn't a big number right now. It's only in the hundreds or thousands. It'd be a very small percentage. But if you have a small, margin of victory, it may become important. Okay, so now let me see what's next here.
Okay, so we're down to
Well, I've got 3 slides
21.
left. Three slides left. So we need audits of every election. We need people to provide oversight. And to do that, the best thing important is to ensure the computer report is frozen prior to the random draw. Watch and record this random draw. And do they include all the ballots? This is what we sued them over. Watch what they do after the batches are tallied, and then review the reports. This is what people need to do to really be a significant player in making sure that these audits are done correctly. We found that getting the ballot images is somewhat of a roadblock. We requested 24 counties in California. San Francisco is the only county that did provide them without resistance. We may be going to court over that. Haven't decided yet. Florida provides them without any problem. And then, as we were talking about, if we can focus on the top maybe 20 districts for November, find out if they have ballot images and get this all configured ahead of time so we're ready to do it. And finally, join the Zoom meeting tomorrow at 12 noon. Just send me your email at raylutz@citizensoversight.org. We'll go into more detail then. So I'll let that'll be the.
That's fantastic. So I think everybody understands that you barely scratched the surface here. We're going to have to develop a tutorial for everybody to in all the counties to understand exactly what you've gone through here. We're going to have to go over this again. People, if you look at all the documents we post, we'll have another session on this next week, and we got to talk about developing this Ray and John's expertise, because it's all going to come down to counting the ballots. I will say that we're in much better shape now than we would have been if we had 117,000 polling stations. So every county is going to have something resembling this technology. John and Ray are the great gurus on this. So we'll do this again next week, not quite as great detail. And since we're out of time, everybody, if you can prepare your questions for these two guys, we'll put up as much information as possible. But, we can't get people out to vote. We can't get them to vote by mail. We can't get the paper ballots in and then have them miscounted. And this is where the rubber reached the road. And this is how George W. Bush got into the White House, and how the senator and governor are now in power in Florida. We're almost out of time. Does anyone have a really quick thing? I want to insert one other thing, by the way. The legislature in Missouri, there was a really good referendum passed in Missouri to set up a redistricting commission, like I talked about, like we have in California, to get around gerrymandering. And the instant response of the Republican legislature in Missouri was to pass their own bill and put it back on the ballot to water it down. And that's something we'll have to talk about more, but it's absolutely critical. Does anybody want to jump in real quick? Next week, we'll do North Carolina again. We'll do this again with the ballot images. Steve will revisit deadlines. Everybody look for John's book. Yes, go ahead.
What are the chances we're going to actually get these ballot images? That's what
I would say this is that it's a state by state thing. In California, everybody can hear me, right? In Florida, a third of the state is giving us images. Another third, we don't know what they're doing. Another third is telling us to go to hell, okay? that they don't have to read these things. They have the originals, okay? That happens to be your larger municipalities, especially municipalities of color, okay? Broward, Miami-Dade.
Yeah, let me say this, John.
Difficulties.
Let me
But
say
we
this
are planning on
is that-
litigation, and supposedly, I guess, we're going to have the Florida Democratic Party is supposed to be our plaintiff in the upcoming case. We're waiting for the courts to open up. I'm waiting to see that to be happen. I am a Democrat, and I've been working with the party for a long time, but I am a nonpartisan, but I appreciate them jumping in because I'm hoping that they will be the first state that parties will get together and stand behind us, the Green, anybody that we can, to make sure that these records are preserved, because I'm very concerned about November's election, of having 2 presidents at one time, and it's very important that we prove to people that elections are real, and we can do this with ballot images and independent audits.
Well, your question is right on point. How do we get the ballot images? First of all, we have to get them made. I mean, Bob Petrakis and I confronted in Ohio, they wouldn't even turn on the ballot imaging machine.
No, Bob.
So,
listen, that is so wrong. The machine doesn't work unless it creates an image first. They lied. They were destroying them after they made them. And if it's generated in the chain of custody, it must be preserved. It's like that judge, the first case, he said, let me ask you a question. If you take ballots and you photocopy them and you use the photocopies to count, what makes you think you can destroy them? It's an easy case to win if you can get a judge that is not partisan and into this problem we got in this country with judges.
Well, we're going to have those judges lined up before the election, because we could actually foresee that they will count the ballots with the ballot imaging machine. If they don't like the outcome, they can just erase whatever they want to erase unless we have people in their face and court orders. Is that correct?
What we need is to get candidates involved, and that if you want my vote, I want you to prove to me that elections are real because you're on the ballot. You have standing. You see what I'm saying? In Maricopa County, the head recorder has asked me that, hey, he wouldn't mind being sued because he wants to release the Dominion ballot images because he wants to prove to the people who don't believe elections are real that they are. And he wants to post the images up by precinct, okay? Wow, wouldn't that be something? The second largest jurisdiction in the country, which is Maricopa, Phoenix, Arizona, would do that. That would be great.
Well, that's the way it needs to be everywhere. So we have 5 months to make that happen.
We do.
And you guys have the knowledge of the technology, and I have to say, difficult as this is and complicated as this, it's a heck of a lot better than it could have been. And so we're now looking at the possibility of X million, over 100 million, maybe, paper ballots coming in and counted and digital images created. But we have to make sure we understand every piece of that puzzle. And you guys are spectacular on doing this. And does anyone else, we have like a minute, does anyone else want to jump in here?
This is Rudy Ardondo with Latino Farmers. I don't understand why it is that we have this fractured system. I mean, the biggest currency for me as a citizen is my vote, okay? There's no higher level of being a citizen than I can exercise my vote. And we reinvent, as a member of the Central Committee at one time in Montgomery County, every election, primary and general, we had to reinvent the system, the process. It makes no sense. It ought to be, at the state level perhaps, and standardized. I mean, I would demand that as a citizen, that's the highest currency that I have, and I want that protected and guarded zealously.
And that's
well,
why
I would say
to file public records requests and demand this, and to work with me and Ray, and especially if you're in a swing state, even though I didn't mean to get into Tennessee. I mean, I've been in and out of Tennessee since 2006, but it's important that we demand these things, and the public records is what they are. Voting is a secret process. Counting is the public process. We got to get back to that if we're going to take our democracy back.
So
You're
do we need
100% right.
to-
And you know, this should be,
do we
going
need
forward,
somebody-
this should be the standard process.
All right.
Everybody gets
We-
a ballot
Harvey,
in the mail.
we need some-
You mark
Harvey,
it, you bring it in or you mail it in, and it's counted transparently. This should be the new standard. I heard someone yelling, yes?
Yeah. Do we need to do this county by county? Do we need an observer?
Yes.
a
It has
lawyer
to
in
be
every single county?
every place there's a machine, every place there's a ballot coming in, wherever there's an election.
So is this in any way realistic?
We think so. You know,
Well, I
at
hope
least the
so, but
states
I
we're
think-
working in and what we're doing. We've already got Arizona saving. Now we're trying to get them released. It's a
Machine in every vote in every county.
and making sure they're there, and then you wait for a close election if it's a tough state. Florida has great records requests. The problem in Florida is getting them to save them. You see what I'm saying?
That's one
Exactly.
state. What about
We will.
other states? There's
It's state by state and county by county.
so we're talking about thousands of counties here.
Yeah, but we go state by state,
Yes.
but we cherry pick counties to pick the fight in.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Can I
That's
just,
what we do. We got to have our lawyers lined up. We want to know what judges we're going to deal with,
Janine,
so
and that's how we make it happen.
can I
That's
just,
what's got to happen. Hey, listen, we're out of time. We will continue this. You guys are spectacular. Thank you, everybody from North Carolina, Steve, John Simon, Paul, Dr. Paul, thanks for running. You know, we will have another session next week. I'll send you the agenda. Nobody left this session. We have more people at the end than we had at the beginning. So thank you so much. John, put out all the documents, please, John and Ray.
I will.
We'll look at it, and next week we'll revisit this issue with questions and comments.
Good.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Let's make democracy work. Okay.